Okay, I'm just going to wait for confirmation, Mr. Mayor, that we're live. Can anybody confirm that we are live? I can't seem to see that at the moment.
It says live at the top left hand.
On the screen, live on YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. I just want confirmation that we're actually.
It's on.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to formally open the meeting.
Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public viewing on YouTube. The first item of business is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, please?
I have no apologies, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if any of the other members do. I'm just admitting Councillor Rahman to the meeting.
Right. Thank you. The next item is declarations of interest.
I can't see any declarations of interest, Mr. Mayor, from anyone.
The next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous full council meeting. Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the previous full council meeting held on the 26th of February 2020. Are there any comments relating to the accuracy of these minutes?
Councillor Addison has her hand raised, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Anderson?
Just to move the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All those in favour of confirming the minutes, please show.
What was it?
Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is report. Please may I see the monitoring officer to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully members have had an opportunity to read the report. It's fairly straightforward. As members will be aware, there is a legal obligation on elected members to attend at least one formal council meeting or represent the council at a formal meeting in a 6-month period. Now, normally there isn't a problem with that. We have had odd occasions when, due to ill health, a member has asked for that 6-month period to be extended. It's something that only full council itself currently can approve. So given the situation that we're in at the moment, we are requesting that this permission or refusal indeed be delegated to an officer. Obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a reduction in the number of meetings being held, particularly in the earlier parts of the lockdown period. And so members have not had the opportunity to attend meetings as they normally would have. In addition, as members all were previously aware, we are working towards the 1st of April and the vesting day for the new Unitary Council. And it is likely that there will be fewer meetings as we get through to the latter stages of the current municipal year. So what we are proposing is that the power to approve an extension to the 6-month period is delegated to myself, or if I have a conflict of interest or may be absent, to the Chief Executive for them to consider. But there are some safeguards I want to make clear. First of all, if there is an opportunity to get any request for an extension to a full council meeting, it will be brought to this meeting. So I would only use the delegation if it was necessary to do so. Secondly, obviously, I would look at certain criteria in terms of the application for the extension. So it can't be made retrospectively. It has to be made in writing before the end of the 6-month period. If it's in relation to long-term sickness, then obviously the normal custom and practice is to allow an extension. If it's because a member is working away from Corby and there are potential technical issues in terms of them being able to access virtual meetings, that will be taken into consideration. Obviously, if they're an Army reservist, and I don't believe we have any Army reservists at present, but if we had, then obviously if they were called up in some way or for any of the armed services, we would grant it. I would also take into account whether the member has actually had opportunities to attend meetings. So, I mean, if a member has had opportunities to attend meetings and has not, then I will take that into account as well. So it's not a clear rubber stamp situation. There will be a thought process that I would go through. So that's basically the report, Mr. Mayor. So I believe Councillor Tom Beattie wishes to come in first, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Beattie?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought John McGee had his hand up before me, but if John's prepared to wait, then that's fine. Can I just ask, Paul, do meetings of the shadow authority or the shadow executive count towards this? I mean, I ask this because it's been suggested recently that the lack of meetings of Corby Borough Council is somehow an indication that councillors aren't doing anything. Just let me give you an example of my last 2 days. Yesterday, I done 4 Zoom meetings, which the first one began at 9 in the morning and finished in mid-afternoon. Today, I had this is my 6th meeting, and the suggestion that because we're not meeting like this, that nothing is going on, I find offensive. And I find that I'm actually doing more meetings in relation to the work of the executive, the work of the shadow authority, and the move towards the unitary authority. Particularly, for instance, I chaired yesterday one of the task and finish groups, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But I just wondered if there was a view on whether the meetings of the shadow authority count in any way towards that.
Okay, I will give an answer to that. It has been the subject of some debate, actually. Obviously, all members of the sovereign councils were effectively transferred onto the shadow authority. It's a difficult one because the legislation isn't clear-cut, but the view of the majority of the county monitoring officers is that attendance at shadow authority meetings, whether they be formal meetings, whether they be the shadow authority or executive committee or overview and scrutiny committee, would count towards attendance. However, equally the view of the county monitoring officers is that members should take every opportunity that is provided to attend meetings of their own sovereign council. And I should also say, following on from the comments of the leader, that whilst obviously attending meetings is an important part of local government and decision making, it needs to be remembered that members are also dealing with constituency and ward issues on a daily basis and have done since the start of the lockdown period. So certainly there are member inquiries and member complaints on behalf of constituents coming in obviously every week. The meeting situation, obviously we're starting to gear up, and obviously our development control committee has met, our One Corby Policy Committee is due to meet in August. We have an audit and governance that will be coming along shortly, and a local plan committee that is going to come along shortly. But the view that was taken at the start of the lockdown period is that only essential business that needed to be brought in front of members was what we would do. That all resources and time would be concentrated on dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're now in a situation, the lockdown situation is obviously eased over the last few weeks following the government guidance, and we can now start to get, I wouldn't say sense of normality, but certainly we can try to get back to doing all of the business as usual that we would expect to be doing. Mr. Mayor, Councillor McGee wishes to come in.
Councillor McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I go into that paper, and just to support Tom, you know, councillors work extremely hard during this COVID, ones in the community, but also in other meetings. And I'm pleased to see in number 1 of the paper today that councils attending external bodies on behalf of the authority councils meetings, because that's not the case in every council. So things like we attend, like the health and wellbeing meetings, talking to CCGs, doing grants, talking to officers, doing our research before these meetings, etc. They work extremely hard, and I think it's a misrepresentation for anybody to suggest that they don't. So I'm pleased to see that under number 1. But Paul, could I just ask for clarification under bullet point 3, where it says any application for an extension must be made in writing. Can we assume, or can we make it clear that that can be through email?
Yeah, that's a fair point, Councillor. Yes, email would actually be preferred because there's clearly any audit trail should anybody ever query it. So yes, application, but it has to be before the end of the 6-month period. We can't accept retrospective. I'll just check the screens, Mr. Mayor, to see if anybody else wishes to come in. Oh, I think Councillor Wellings wishes to come in.
Councillor Wellings?
You're on mute at the moment, Councillor Wellings.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's fine,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, just further to Tom's point, the parish meetings have continued. The parish for Gretton and Weldon set up instantly on Zoom, so we've had meetings every month for both parishes. So yeah, I would hope that would count to us attending meetings on behalf of the borough.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. It will qualify as what we would call a ward meeting, which is no different from obviously some of the other councillors attending tenants and residents group meetings. You're not there on behalf of the council, you're there as the ward member. So there is a distinction to be made between things such as parish council meetings. If you're a parish councillor, obviously, it would, you know, you're there as a parish councillor. But unfortunately, no, that would count as a ward meeting, not a council meeting.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Sorry, but you're here tonight, so you're okay. I can't see any further hands raised, Mr. Mayor. I'll just check the other screen. No further speakers. Oh, sorry, Councillor Addison wishes to come in.
Councillor Addison?
Just to move the recommendations, Chair.
Second.
Thank you. We shall now go to a vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against?
That was carried, Mr. Mayor.
It's carried. Go on to the next item on the agenda. the COVID-19 pandemic. Please may I see the Chief Executive to address the Council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to give an introduction and then I'll pass across to Jonathan, who will provide some detail. Whilst the COVID emergency and related restrictions are still with us, we are now able, following government advice, to reopen our leisure facilities and to consider reopening other buildings like the Cube and Dean House. Current government advice will have to be observed throughout, and on the 1st of August, new guidance on returning to the workplace is due to be announced. Our leisure facilities are due to reopen this Saturday, 25th of July, and it is intended to open the other buildings in early August, having taken on board the awaited new government advice. Jonathan has been leading our cross-service team working on the recovery stage, and he will provide some more detail about the opening both of our leisure and other buildings. Throughout, Councillor Erdison has been observing the work of the team and has given advice and guidance to officers. And I'll pass you across to Jonathan now.
Thank you, Norman, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members. So I'm going to briefly take you through what the Recovery Working Group has been doing over recent months and then touch on some specific service area updates. So in May, the Council established a Recovery Working Group, which was to develop corporate standards and guidance to inform the safe delivery of all Council services and building operations, whilst adhering to prevailing government guidance. The group has met weekly with membership from all service areas, our health and safety advisor, trade unions, and with member representation. And in doing so, that's meant that all those parties have been able to input to the development of risk assessments and procedures throughout the process. A key element of the group's current work has been to establish the corporate protocols to ensure consistency across the departments, but it's also been to complete the working safe documents, which follow the government's COVID secure guidelines. And due to the wide variety of functions the council undertakes, and to ensure a link between the building users and those that manage those buildings, we set up various subgroups for our corporate buildings and for specific tasks that are carried out across the council. So, for example, where people are working in people's homes and residents' homes. So to date, we've signed off 13 working safe assessments, with the remaining 3 that are in the final stages of consultation. The first service area I wanted to touch on was culture and leisure. Members will be aware that the golf course reopened in May with a successful appointment system that's been in place and has been popular with residents during the lockdown period. But as Norman's mentioned, our leisure facilities will be reopening on the 25th of July. Although certain facilities such as the health suite and the crash and catering facilities will remain closed for the time being. So all swimming lessons, fitness sessions, lane swimming clubs will be operating. However, they will be with reduced occupancy. And currently leisure swimming is under review in terms of whether that can be delivered. Members may also be aware of a We Are Ready campaign that's been launched, which will be informing customers of what to expect when visiting facilities. So that's underway at the moment, and that's sort of reinforcing that leisure facilities will be available, but on a pre-booked basis with reduced occupancy numbers and cleaning equipment and sanitizer stations available to ensure that we're complying with guidance. And then moving on to the corporate estate, so buildings such as the Cube and Dean House. In August, we will be offering appointments in the one-stop shop for customers most in need of a face-to-face meeting, along with appointments to use the cash office on a Monday morning and a Friday afternoon. And this appointment system is principally in line with what other councils have been doing across the county. We also expect the Cube Library to start delivering an appointment service from August, and we started facilitating weddings in the Cube in July. From August, we also plan to increase the occupancy of our back office staffing, but initially that will be at only 30% of original occupancy levels to ensure that we're maintaining a safe workplace for our staff. And some of the controls we put in place will involve things like increased access points to buildings, sanitizer stations, virtual corridors, perspex screening, and an increased cleaning regime in those facilities. But for members' awareness, we have throughout the pandemic have to maintain a skeleton staffing at all our back office facilities to ensure that we have maintained important service provision throughout. And we've also maintained access and a limited service to our commercial tenants at the Corby Enterprise Centre and the Corby Innovation Hub, where a number of our tenants were delivering supporting services to the NHS and other important COVID response services. We're also planning to reintroduce charging in our council-owned car parks from the beginning of August. And then finally, touching on the housing service, throughout the pandemic, we've continued to provide priority emergency repairs to our tenants' properties, whilst also keeping the important work in terms of void turnaround to a safe and legal standard to make sure we've got a flow of properties coming back for people in need of those properties. And we've also maintained compliance inspections and essential works across the estate throughout the pandemic. Obtaining materials continues to be a big challenge in terms of moving forward with repairs and maintenance and works across the housing estate. But I'm pleased to report that in July, we recommenced the delivery of external works for our council houses, and we're looking to roll out internal works next month and start to get back on track with delivering that service to tenants. I suppose just to finish off, what I've outlined can be considered a first phase. The recovery of services across the council will be subject to continual review as government guidance changes for specific functions. And further phases will follow as that guidance is updated and changing. However, it is likely that many of the measures I've mentioned, such as home working, will be with us for some time as social distancing practices are required to be maintained. That finishes my update, and I'll be happy to take any questions on anything I've outlined.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Pengelly, I think, was first.
Councillor Pengelly?
Yeah, I think we've got to say a big thank you to Tom and Jean and other members who have been working on the unitary body. The amount of work, there's a couple of new phases. One is unmute and the other one is zoomed out. And I had a meeting on Friday where I was on just for a few hours and on 2 meetings, and that felt zoomed out afterwards. So I don't know how they do it. So a big thank you, but also a big thank you to all our staff who have continued working through this pandemic, and some of the work they've done in giving grants to small businesses, getting repairs done, etc. It's just been unbelievable. And I've spoken to some of the officers, and I think we all agree that what a good job, and thank you. Just on to some of the things that are happening, and I'm chair of an organisation called APSI, and APSI sent out some best practice last week on leisure facilities opening. And Chris Stevenson sent APSI back everything that we're doing in Corby. And they've asked for that to be used as best practice, because he said, this is absolutely brilliant stuff that you're doing. You've thought about this. We can see you put a lot of work into this. And can we use it as best practice to send to other councils? And I'm happy that Chris said yes. So thank you for that. Just one question that I've got, and it's to do with community centre. It's to do with sheltered schemes. I've got 4 sheltered schemes on my ward, and I'm being asked about the community room that they use. When will they be able to start using that? They can go into community centres, they can go into pubs, but they can't go into their own community room and their own sheltered schemes. So that what they're saying is, can something be put in place, some risk assessments or whatever, so they can get them opening again, so they can socially meet as a group of people that live in these sheltered schemes. So thank you very much, and that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mark.
I don't know, Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether Norman or Jonathan want to take the questions one at a time, or Mr. Mayor, Jonathan wishes to come in.
Jonathan, come in, please.
Yeah, no, I'll gladly take that question away in terms of can we put a risk assessment in place. I suppose we'd have to double check in terms of the government guidance in terms of whether that specific use is permitted, given it could be a higher risk for the residents in place there. So we have to look into that and come back.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I can add nothing to that. I would have given the same answer.
Mr Mayor, Councillor McGee wish to come in?
Councillor McGee?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I too pass on my thanks to all the hard-working officers during this difficult time? And it has been difficult, and I know they put a lot of work into the community to ensure that people are being looked after, are getting food delivered, etc., as well as all the other council duties we do. So we really, really do appreciate it, because they talk to us, the residents talk to us, and they appreciate it too. Can I just ask that when the leisure facilities open, that people, we're human beings, and we're going to learn as we go through the next few weeks when it opens. Some mistakes will be made, some residents may make mistakes, we do. But it's a learning process. Nobody has to jump in any bandwagon. We're working together to try and help our services go forward and help our residents. So as long as we're moving together and learning from that and correct anything that we feel could be better, and that's the way we can go work forward together and help each other.
I think no matter how well planned we have this, we do have to learn as we go along. And I think change to what we're proposing is inevitable. Things will work and some things will not work, or they won't work particularly well. And we need the advice of the public, and we need the advice of members about what we're doing right and what we could be doing differently and better.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Julie Kay wants to come in?
Councillor Kay?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, Jonathan, echo the thanks. I've been inundated with environmental, housing and benefit issues, and I have just been so impressed with the officers, how calm they've been, how quickly they've come back, and how they've just dealt with everything. They've been absolutely wonderful. So please pass on my thanks for that. I've got two very specific questions. The first one, the leisure swimming, you said that's under review. When might there be an answer on that? Because I have a few mums on Oakley Vale who are very keen to get back to their swimming for their own mental health more than anything. And I just don't know what to tell them. And the other thing is, I've got myself in a real pickle over dance. I've been working hard as chair of the trustees for the Oakley Vale Community Centre. We've had our water system flushed, we've got screens up, stickers up, all the usual health and safety. But I'm really confused as to whether we can allow Irish dance back in. Obviously not ballroom dance or any dance that involves contact. But what is the definitive, if there is one yet, about Irish dancing? Can they come in as long as they're at least 2 meters apart, or is it just still a no-no? Because I've really got myself confused about that.
I don't know if Jonathan can add anything, but on both, I think I'll have to come back to you, Councillor Kane. But we certainly should be able to get a response to the dancing very quickly. I'm not sure how long we're going to monitor the situation with regard to leisure swim. We'll also have to see how we get on with those who we are allowing in to swim and how they can do so successfully with the prohibitions that we've got on.
Thank you.
I'll have to come back to you both, unless Jonathan can add anything.
Yeah, the only thing I could add on the leisure swim is that I think it's important we start to get some of the services delivered at the pool and other facilities, and we learn and monitor how that's going before we try and do everything. And things like leisure swim will be particularly difficult to manage from a social distancing perspective. So it's not saying that it's not going to happen, but I think we need to get the other processes in place. And I know my culture and leisure colleagues are working very hard on that to ensure that that happens as safely as possible. The dance question, we'd have to come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Addison wish to come in?
Councillor Addison?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was again just to join my colleagues in saying thank you to the officers for all the hard work that they've done. You know, you got off the ground very, very quickly, and the services to our residents have been maintained to the highest standard, and thank you for that.
Councillor McEwen wished to come in.
Councillor McEwen?
Right. Councillor McEwen. Councillor
There we go.
McEwen.
How's that?
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor McEwen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's just a question to Jonathan. I couldn't quite hear him. Did they say the cash desk in the Cube will be opened on Mondays and Fridays for paying council tax and rents? Because I've had quite a lot of inquiries about that. People that's not paid council tax because they'd rather pay it than do it by direct debit. And also the people who like to go up and meet people, unfortunately, that probably won't happen at the Cube when they're paying their rent and council tax. Am I still there?
Yeah, no, that's fine, Councillor. Mr. Mayor, I think Jonathan will come in on that.
Jonathan, can you
Yeah.
come in, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the cash office will open for an appointment system on Monday morning and Friday afternoons. So during that time, the other one-stop shop appointments won't be taking place, and that's just to sort of manage the number of people in the building. But it will be an appointment-based system, so people won't be able to walk in off the street in terms of being able to make payments.
I don't know if the Chief Executive wants to come in or he's...
No, I'll wait, Paul, it's okay.
Okay, Councillor McGee wants to come back in, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be wrong of me, after thanking the officers very much and indeed members, not to mention the group of volunteers out there and the organisations from the voluntary sector who have did some terrific work during this time. Organisations like Helping Hands, the food banks, and indeed many individuals that are helping people in their houses. And I'm sure we would all like to show appreciation for them too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, the Chief Executive wishes to come in.
Norman?
Yeah, just picking up on what Councillor McGee said about both staff and voluntary organisations. I will convey that thanks to members and the voluntary organisations tomorrow. I would emphasise, however, that whilst there have been outstanding individual efforts, it's been a considerable collective effort by staff in particular to continue providing services as they have done. And I'm sure they'll rise to the challenge of getting back to what we consider a new norm.
Right, Mr. Mayor, I don't see any further hands raised at the moment.
Right, okay. I'd just like to say, add my thanks to the council and the officers for all the hard work they've done and move the council on like we're still going on. Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the item. Please may I see the leader of the council to address the council.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to give a verbal update on progress towards unitary status, the local government reorganisation effort programme, which is going on at the moment. Members will be aware that there was a briefing conducted by the Chief Executive of the County Council and the Chair and Interim Chief Executive of the Children's Trust, as well as representatives from Adult Social Care and the programme team just over a week or so ago. A briefing which was being done to all of the sovereign councils across both the north and the west. And subsequently to that, there has been the usual regular note which goes out to elected members giving an update on unitary news for North Shadow members. So there isn't a huge amount of new information to report on that. Obviously, there's 9 months to go until the go live date on the 1st of April. There's a hell of a lot of work going on. Member task and finish groups are up and running. Lots of activity on areas such as council tax harmonisation, budgets, vision and culture, senior appointments. My own task and finish group that I chair as one of the members of the executive on governance has met twice. And in fact, we had a meeting via Zoom yesterday. And that's the task and finish group, which will make recommendations around the governance, the future governance of the unitary authority from the 1st of April. Just on that, one of the key messages that came out of that member-led task and finish group was the need for the new authority to be as open and transparent and engaged as possible. And I think that's certainly what is being worked towards. There are a number of those task and finish groups, I think, as people know. There are 10 members of the executive for the North Shadow Authority, which is made up of representatives from each of the sovereign councils, the 5 sovereign councils which make up the North Shadow. And each one of us has a responsibility for a particular area, a particular task and finish area. Jean Addison, the deputy leader, also chairs one of the task and finish groups. As well as that, however, there has been, and members will have received this, or should have received this from the programme office, or an email direct from the leader of the Shadow Authority, Councillor Russell Roberts, setting out the portfolios for each of the members of the executive. So that information you should have. What the leader of the Shadow Authority asked was that anyone who had any interest in any of those portfolio areas should make that known. And just let me say, what those areas are, so that people are aware. Adults' health and well-being, including public health. The portfolio holder for that will be Councillor Martin Griffiths from Wellingborough. Children, families and education. The lead member for that will be Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, who's a County Council representative. Planning, Regulatory, Enforcement and Welfare Services, led by Councillor Stephen North, who's the leader of East North Hants Council. Finances and Revenue and Benefits, the lead member is Councillor Ian Jelly, who's on there from Kettering Council. Corporate Services is the area that I lead on, and Highways, Transport, Environment and Climate is led by Councillor Jason Smithers, again, who's one of the 2 County Council representatives on the executive. Growth, Infrastructure, Regeneration, Skills and Employment, led by Councillor David Jenny from East North Hants. Property, Assets and Housing. The lead member is the leader of the Shadow Authority himself, Councillor Russell Roberts. Sports, Leisure, Culture and Tourism is led by Councillor Tom Partridge Underwood, who's the deputy leader of Wellingborough Council. And finally, Customer Services, Digital and Transformation is led by our own Councillor Jean Addison. Those portfolio holders haven't actually got to work as yet, but there's a paper going to the executive tomorrow to confirm these appointments, and it will be, re-emphasised that those who want to get involved in some way in these portfolio areas, please indicate that that's the case. Today, I attended some training which was led by the Local Government Association, and it was for the panel of people who will choose the new permanent chief executive for the Unitary Authority. And those interviews will take place in early August. A long list has already been drawn up. There were a number of applications. The applications which went out received a lot of interest, and they're a long list of candidates has been approved. That needs to then be shortlisted and then people invited for an interview. And that will take place over 2 days on the 5th and 6th of August. So that work is continuing. Clearly, there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done. For instance, service blueprints are being worked up, which set out how the services provided by the county council will be split, and how those currently provided by districts and boroughs in the north will come together. As you can imagine, that in itself is a massive piece of work, and really is a unique opportunity, as Councillor Roberts has said recently, to focus on what is good and works well, whilst also identifying what could change to make services better. In the north, I think of the county, we've always embraced change, and we've always had a collaborative approach to working. These blueprints will come to the shadow meeting later in the summer, and members will have an opportunity to have constructive and positive discussions about those proposals. All of this, of course, is happening alongside our response to the pandemic. And it's been a challenge. I've gone on record as saying previously that simply achieving the April the 1st vesting day date in itself was a challenge, without the added challenge of having to respond to a health pandemic, the like of which we've never seen in our lifetime. And the fact that we're doing both at the same time is it's putting a huge burden on staff and officers who are involved in that, as well as members who are on at the various bodies, such as the executive and task and finish groups. There's still confidence that timetable will be adhered to. I still think it's challenging. I've made that clear and continue to make that clear. However, it won't be for the want of trying to get us there on the 1st of April. And then, of course, the elections will take place to the new unitary authority next May, on May the 6th. And those councillors who get elected on May the 6th will form the elected membership of that new unitary authority. In the meantime, we as the shadow authority made up of the existing sovereign councils will continue to prepare the ground to ensure that the unitary council is in a position to basically take over responsibility for the provision of services from April the 1st. You will know, of course, that the programme itself changed from one of a transformative programme to one of Safe and Legal Plus. And I think that was a sensible move. At the very least that we need to be on the 1st of April is safe and legal, so that all of the services that we're expected to deliver, all of the services that our residents here in Corby, as well as across the whole of Northamptonshire, expect to be able to be delivered on the 1st of April. And they should not see any change from March the 31st to the 1st of April. And what I mean by that is that they don't see any change in the delivery of those services. What will change, of course, is the body which delivers them. People's bins will still be collected, house repairs will still be done, and everything else that they expect to be done will continue to be done. So there's a lot of work to go on. I think alongside this, and a more general point, which I'd like to draw members' attention to, is that as we move into the post-COVID environment, the government are looking at economic recovery. They're also bringing forward a devolution and economic recovery bill. And that has caused, I have to say, some consternation within the local government family. That's how I can describe it, within organisations such as the Local Government Association, the District Councils Network, of which I'm a vice chair. And it's felt that the government's view about economic recovery is very much tied up with what they call devolution, but what we see as some form of enforced reorganisation. And already in different areas of the country, councils are being asked to consider to do what we're doing here in Northamptonshire. There's resistance to that. I mean, for instance, in Hertfordshire, there's a proposal to create a single unitary authority of some 1.2 million people. I'm also told in North Yorkshire, district and borough councils in North Yorkshire have been told to prepare for unitary or unitaries. And the previous requirement for consensus on this is being removed. So there's no need for councils to completely agree on this. Councils who aren't in agreement will be in some way forced into these new arrangements. We in Corby are aware of that. We were the only one of the 8 councils in Northamptonshire which opposed the introduction of a unitary council or 2 unitary councils for the county. We made our opposition clear. We consulted our public locally and they made their opposition clear. Despite that, it went ahead because 7 out of the 8 councils in the county agreed to the proposal. I don't think that any council in the future is going to have the same opportunity to oppose. And the worry is that the post-COVID environment in local government will give central government an opportunity to do away with 2-tier local authorities. And that might seem a rather extreme view, but it's not. And it's not a view just held by the leaders of Labour controlled councils. It's a view that I've heard from Conservative colleagues on the District Councils Network and on the LGA, who also believe that the government are coming after those sort of 2-tier arrangements where you have a county surrounded by districts. So I think there's huge change coming in terms of the way local government is organised in the UK. We're ahead of the game here, probably in Northamptonshire, and we may well be looked upon as some sort of template for the way to do this going forward. But so I think that presents a challenge for the new unitary authority when it takes office going forward, as does, of course, the post-COVID financial situation and how that's going to look, and how that will affect the ability of the new council to operate effectively in the way that it should. But I think that's something that's going to be faced by every local authority up and down the country. And I know that the government have provided significant funds, two tranches of 1.6 billion, followed by another 500 million to local authorities. But in reality, that goes nowhere near to plugging the gap, which most councils will face in terms of their finances. They've also, of course, given some indication of how they will help with the lost revenue and income that councils have suffered as a result of responding to the COVID crisis. So whilst we're coping and we're doing well, there are huge challenges coming down the road towards us, not least what the future financing of local government in general is going to look like. That's a fairly wide-ranging presentation, focusing on some local issues and some more general issues, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that members might have.
Do any councillors have questions for the leader?
Sorry, Councillor Isles, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Isles?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we
Yep.
can. Mr.
That's
Councillor.
okay. Is there a possibility of the unitary vesting day being put back because of COVID-19, especially with the second spike predicted during the winter period? And another question I have, local councils have lost a lot of money through the loss of income streams due to COVID-19. How will this impact on the unitary finances? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'll try to answer that. I mean, in terms of the second question, which I'll take first, that's hard to predict, clearly. We don't know. We don't know whether there's going to be a second spike. We don't know how long the current crisis will continue. So trying to predict what the income will look like or what the financial situation going forward is going to be is a bit like sticking your finger in the air a little bit. So it's very difficult to make a confident prediction about what that might look like. As far as vesting day, I think it's in the program that there is a flexibility within that. If there was a need to extend vesting day beyond April the 1st, that could be considered. It's my understanding, and maybe Paul will correct me if I'm wrong about that any extension to the period, any extension to vesting day would need to be agreed by Parliament, because the structural changes order is quite specific about April the 1st being vesting day, and any extension beyond that, I would need the agreement of MPs. But I think there is provision within the amended programme for that request to be made, but no one's suggesting at the moment that request will be made. I don't know, Paul, if there's anything you want to add maybe to that.
No, I mean, it would require Parliament or the Secretary of State to agree that. Currently the legislation allows for vesting day on the 1st of April, and that is obviously what the programme is working to. But obviously, given particularly the COVID pandemic, the MHCLG are obviously monitoring the progress that's being made. And hopefully, if there were serious concerns, those would be flagged up well in advance of vesting day. But for the moment, the programme is vesting day on the 1st of April, and that's what the legislation says. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just in relation to Councillor Iles's other point about finances, just to make members aware that there is a financial report going to the next One Corby Policy Committee in early August, which will obviously give a better indication at a local level of what the impact has been to date and what mitigating measures are being taken to address any financial issues. So just to make members and the public aware, that report will be going in early August. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anyone else? Any more questions?
I don't see any other speakers, Mr. Mayor.
I think Councillor Wellings has her hand up. I can see.
Sorry.
Councillor
Right.
Welling.
Yes, Councillor Wellings, who's muted again?
Councillor Welling?
It's all right, she's just unmuting. Mr. Mayor.
I
Yes.
do apologise. Why it's not long enough. To Councillor Isles' point with the losses incurred in this financial year, Tom, am I correct in understanding that the losses recorded in this year actually won't be reported in this year, but they'll be carried forward to the following financial year?
Can I refer that question to the Chief Executive, if you don't mind? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, we have Adrian Sibley, our Director of Corporate Services, here with us.
Adrian,
I don't know if Adrian wants to come in.
you want to come in?
If I may, please, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
I can't remember the
I didn't realise Adrian was on the call. So that's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I can't remember the precise figures off the top of my head, but the loss for this year, for loss of income, is somewhere in the region of about £2 million. To offset that, we've received something like £1 million worth of government grants in 3 tranches. So the net loss this year is £1 million. However, what I think Councillor Wellings is referring to is the loss on council tax and business rates gets reported next year because we account for the income on that the year after we receive it. So the loss that I've just referred to is purely in relation to the lost income for fees and charges this year. Next year, there'll also be a loss for council tax income and business rates income, but that will fall into next year.
Thank you.
I can't see anybody else, Mr. Mayor, that wants to come in.
Well, okay, then that concludes. Thank you. That concludes that item. Thank you, councillors, and that concludes the business on the agenda. I now declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.